Alright, welcome back. So we're going to start doing some of our detail painting on this building. The first thing that I'm going to do is work on some of these exposed brick areas because those are going to require several layers. So I want to get the first layer on those, move on to some other bits so that those can dry in between, and this will move along as quick as possible. My initial plan, which is always I reserve the right to change my plan at any time. I'm going to start with administratum gray over the exposed brick areas. That's mostly for the grout lines, and you can see here that the different areas, some are cut deeper than others, which I think is fine. It's probably realistic. But we're going to go over with the gray mostly to get the grout lines. Once that's dried, we're going to come in with the Deathclaw brown for the brick. Then dry brush over that with some white to show, some plaster that may have still remained stuck to the brick after that it was hit. Some other things that I'll do is the cabling will all end up being black. Some of the connection points I haven't quite decided yet, but they're either going to be a gray or potentially metallic. Any of the grates that look like they might be venting something will be a metallic washed with Nuln Oil black, and potentially a few of these hopefully show some dripping coming from them. These other mechanical things, will be something other than the base color of the building. Haven't quite decided yet. Something like this conduit here, probably be black, maybe gray. Not sure yet. Again, the venting. There are a few places, like right next to the door here, where there's some controls, so we'll use some brighter colors in that to indicate the controls, things like that. And finally finish up with probably an earth shade or brownish wash, and then dry brush some areas, and then overspray it with a very light textured sand. So when we get started, I'm gonna keep this going real time initially, just to give another example of how I like to do my paint. So I always say water down your paint, so I'm just gonna give you a little example of that. I'm gonna take some of the paint out here, get it into one of my wells. And I always have 2 cups of water. I have basically clean water, dirty water, and change them both out fairly regularly. So I like to take a small straw and I get some of the clean water and I put it in there. So I don't know if you can tell, this paint looks relatively thick. This really thins it out, lets it get into areas. I always prefer thinner rather than thicker paints, because the thinner paints, if they're too thin, you can always put on extra coats, or just get more paint and thicken it up a little bit. The top piece doesn't really have any exposed brick, so I'm not going to worry about that. You can see the pieces separate fine, so the spraying, I didn't have to worry about anything with the building and the spray kind of connecting the sections together. I was a little worried about that. Alright, so get some dark grays, some of the blacks in there, and the initial gray for the bricks. I'm gonna do the Deathclaw brown for the bricks now. Do some of the other details, probably some of the metallic here. The cables were pain for me. My hand just isn't steady enough. It's gonna be several times going back and forth on the cables before I'm happy with them. May or may not show all of that, just because it's going to be a little tedious for me going back and forth and worrying about videoing at the same time. Probably not the most conducive thing to success, so do a few more bits here and keep going. Alright, I guess these sessions are going long. Keeps timing out the camera. Just still doing some detail parts. One thing I did want to mention was the brushes. I've got some of these more expensive Army Painter brushes. And then I've got like a really cheap brush like this from, and all I'm talking about is cost, from Michael's Art Supplies. I find I have much more control over this brush than I do the expensive Army Painter ones. I also find that this one is easier to clean up. So I've had people tell me always, you know, if you're going to spend on anything, spend on the brushes. I don't find that to be the case personally. It's all a feel thing. It's whatever works for you. I'm actually going to go back to Michael's and see if I can find more of these brushes, or this style brush in a, or this brand brush in a couple of different styles, because I much prefer it to the Army Painter ones that that I feel I have less control of. But you can see it's coming along. Alright, so I did off camera, I did clean up some of the cabling, and other things. So much of the detail work now is done. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to dry brush some white over the bricks, just to give it that look that some of the plaster that was blasted off stayed on the bricks. After that, I'm gonna dry brush the door with some lighter gray. Then that'll dry. Then we're gonna start with our different washes. Okay, so before we go and do the washes, I noticed in watching Rogue One that a lot of the buildings had some very worn either red or blue paint on the buildings, mostly on the first floor, so that's what I'm going to try and replicate that here. I'm going to go with red. What I want to do with this though is I want to stay away from anything that's already been damaged even a little bit, because obviously that would have taken away the paint. So just gonna work with areas of the wall that are still intact, fully intact. So I'm gonna put some red paint on those, and then I'm gonna come back. I just had this in the basement. It's for staining. It's a sponge for applying stain, but I'm going to use this sponge to then reapply white paint over the red and hopefully get a nice worn look out of it. Alright, so I haven't done this before, but we're going to try. So I put the red on where I want it, and now I'm going to take a lot of it off or cover it with the white. So I've prepared that. We're going to go at it with the sponge. We'll see how this goes. I did water the white down some, but if too much of the red is bleeding through, I'll go back with less watered down white. Alright, so while I'm waiting for this to dry, I mixed feelings on how the red came out. I'm hoping that the wash will let it all blend in a little bit. I just tested the wash on the first wash on the roof here, so I'm going with a sepia, highly diluted with water, just to give it that kind of the worn, dirty, oily, kind of battle-ridden look for the city, just to compare this to the rest. So the sepia gives it a little bit of a yellowy tinge, more of a dirty yellow. So I'm going to do this, then I'm going to come back with some Nuln Oil in certain spots, and do some Nuln Oil on it as well after the sepia, the diluted sepia dries. Okay, now I'm going to do some diluted Nuln Oil. This is going to be a spot thing, it's not going to be the whole thing. I'm mostly looking for damaged areas, vents, and things like that. Alright, sorry about the ambient noise again, the garage door is open. We're going to be doing a coat of this textured paint, really distant, really light. This is just to give a little bit of a sandblasted type of a look, you know, dusty type of a look to the building. One thing I will suggest about this, I've already shaken it and I've already cleared the nozzle. This textured paint, because there's particulate in it, the nozzles do tend to clog, so don't just aim it at the building and start spraying, because it may all of a sudden just release and throw a glob on your building, so you don't want to do that. So I've already cleared this, and we're going to do a really light coating of this, then we're going to come back with a sealer and we'll wrap up the video. Okay, last step before the wrap up, I'm going to do a little dull coat on this. This is just a sealer. It's clear. It's just to seal in all of the paint, hopefully make it hold up a little bit better. Alright, here's the completed building. Thank you for sticking through the video. I was quite happy with the final results. The red worn painting wasn't 100% sure of, but I think it looks alright. It looks like maybe there was some graffiti that somebody tried to cover up, or that someone was patching the building, that kind of thing. So I'm happy enough with the way that it turned out. As I always tell people, you know, the painted building, no matter what, is going to look better than just the plain plastic building. The same for the minis. So just give it a try, see what you can do. The worst that can happen is you don't like it and you paint over it and you try again. But anyways, thank you very much. I'm going to put a link in the description for this building and to Print Train, the Etsy shop there where I got it from. So if you're interested, you can get it there. If you can, please, and you haven't already, please subscribe, click the bell for alerts, and give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much.